Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining us on Quake It Up. How are you? How are you feeling? You've just come from yearly meeting as well. So how are you?
It's been quite a week, hasn't it? We've been doing a lot of things, and it's been, I think I haven't recovered yet from Britain yearly meeting. It usually takes me a little while. But no, I'm good, and it's really fun to be here with you today.
So to give a bit of background for those of you who don't know, Lindsay goes on Instagram as the Frugal Quaker, and that's how I came to know you and just loved your content. Thought it was a really good idea. So today we're going to be talking about things like frugality, how that links to Quakerism, and maybe some helpful tips as to how to live a more frugal / Quaker life. But I suppose to start off with, do you want to maybe just walk us through how you came to Quakerism and what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I thought about coming to Quakers for such a long time before I actually got through the door. I feel like it was a process of sort of drip feeding, because I would attend the Quaker meeting house for different events at my local Quaker meeting house. That probably, my first contact with the actual meeting house was probably about 10 years before I came to my first meeting. And I would see posters and I would think, wow, they sound great. And then I started getting a little bit more intentional. I'd been exploring some different religions. I'd been seeking a spiritual home. And I just started thinking that, do you know what, actually Quakers seem like a really good fit. I'd like to know more. And it was around June or July 2016, I bought my first Quaker book. So it was Geoffrey Durham's A Guide for Newcomers. And I got that. And I started reading it, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this feels right. This feels like the right thing for me. And I think I may not have even finished the book, or I had just finished it. So within literally weeks of starting it, I was in my first Quaker meeting, and I've never looked back. And that it was the right place for me. It ticks all of the boxes in terms of ethics and testimonies and the way that people show up for Quakerism and the different approaches. Like, everything is embraced. There's no set rules. I just, it was all good. So it took a very long process of discernment, as Quaker things usually do. And it was right.
I love that. I think that's quite similar to how it was for me as well. Like it kind of grabs you, and you kind of not sure how that feels, being enticed by something. And then it takes, how does this feel? Do I like it? And then, quite often at least obviously for us too, it's both, actually, this fits really well. I think this is something I do want to do a video on this, that I just love Quakerism. I love, I suppose I'd be a bit weird if I didn't, being a Quaker YouTuber, but it's just everything. I just like it all. I like the weird stuff. I like the non-weird stuff. I think it's just amazing. Would you say that you were living frugally before you became a Quaker, or
I would.
And these sort of dovetailed?
Yes, I would. I would say that from the get-go, the testimony of simplicity really, really spoke to me. And it didn't feel like, and this is maybe the wrong way of looking at it, but it didn't feel like being part of the Quaker community was making me compromise at all as a person. So in some places I may need to censor or edit who I am, but it felt like I could literally just show up as me, and it, that was fine. There was no problems. And it felt like I was amongst like-minded people, even though not all Quakers are frugal. Absolutely. And for many Quakers, the peace testimony is, the really important one.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's more about a common language. I was finding that I was questioning a lot of the material choices in my life. So I was questioning spending habits. I've never been an enormous spender, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about my frugal journey, and I can give you a bit more context about that. I was starting to really question, I'm purchasing things. Where are they coming from? Who is being harmed in this process? What does this industry support? And I'd started really, really scaling back on things and being a lot more intentional about wherever I would spend money or energy. And it felt like that was not necessarily the beginning of my frugal journey, but it was definitely there when I came to Quake. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm around people who, even if they don't necessarily live the same way that I do, they can see my point of view and where I'm coming from, and they don't They don't see it as some kind of deficit or some way of depriving myself of things. It's more of a considered conscious choice. And so I was able to explore that within Quakerism, which was really incredibly helpful and supportive, and helped me to see that actually maybe some of the people that I was spending time with, some of the messages that they were giving me about how I was living or how I was attempting to live, were not necessarily very helpful for me or very loving or supportive.
What I like about that, and what it makes me feel, is that in Quakers, yeah, there's lots of different people who have lots of different foci. You know, as you say, there are the peace activists. There are the ones that are really into simplicity, for example. But because, as you say, there's this common language and stuff, even if that's not speaking necessarily completely to my condition and stuff, or where I am in my life right now, I can understand what you're saying, and what you say resonates with me, because we have that same, as you say, spiritual language. That same, I understand, coming from the testimony of simplicity, where you're coming from, and I respect and support and uphold that, even if it's not necessarily my way of living yet. Maybe it will be, especially maybe after this conversation. How would you say frugality impacts your life? How does it manifest? I suppose we'll elaborate probably more on this as we go. But you're talking about, thinking about your choices. You're looking, I suppose, at how your choices affect the wider world. So it's not just simple in terms of I don't want to buy branded clothing, but it's like I'm concerned about the negative consequences of branded clothing as well. So how does it affect you?
It's been a process of steps, and it's definitely taken a long time to get to where I am now, and I'm probably a long way away from where I hope to be in the future. But the way that it has changed things, and the way that it kind of shows up, is that I'm very mindful about where I spend my money and what I spend my money on. And I think that in the past, I was really driven by things that I might want, and I've shifted that perspective towards things that I need. So now, if I'm thinking I need to get something, I ask myself, is this something that I want, or is this something that I need? I started informing myself more about things like fast fashion, about the toxins that are used in clothes, the clothes dyeing process, the carbon impact of transporting goods around the world, the ethical considerations of some companies, how they pay their staff, whether they pay taxes, the kinds of industries that certain companies support in terms of wars. So I started not being quite so blinkered to what was going on around me, but I was far away from perfection now, and I was definitely on a learning curve at that point. So I made a really conscious decision, possibly about 5 or 6 years ago. So we're talking maybe like 2019, to either only buy new clothes from companies with some kind of ethical statement consideration that is supported, and verified, to stop buying fast fashion in a new capacity so that I wasn't supporting those industries. So I'll buy secondhand clothing, or I'll buy ethical clothing in what I have hoped has been ethical. So that was a really big, because that was a political statement, really, on a really small scale, saying I choose not to support that industry. I think that the amount of clothing that's been produced by fast fashion and the amount of clothing that we have in the world is shocking. I think that we all have, me included, too many clothes, probably. Most of us, not everybody obviously, but most people have more clothes than they need. And I've seen a statement that's come out time and time again. I've reposted it on Instagram, that we currently have enough clothing on the planet to serve the next 6 generations without another garment being produced, which it makes my spine tingle in a bad way, thinking that this is just kind of skin crawling. That's sort of one example of how it shows up. Who I bank with feels important because of the power that banks have in the world to support wars. It all feels like it's very easy, and I am definitely a person who found it very easy to kind of go, well, I don't really have much power over these things. And I've learned over the years that actually I can vote. I can vote in small ways, both at elections, and I can vote also in small ways by either supporting companies or not supporting companies. Sometimes it's just a gentle nudge to a friend or a family member who may be doing something without realizing it. I did a lot of sort of like animal rights activism as a teenager, and so I remember a lot of the information that we had about certain companies. So, but it's like, it's not new information. It's been part of my life for a long time, but I keep shaping the direction that I'm going in, and I try really hard to support brands that are ethical and demonstrate to other people that it's not difficult to make the initial change. You know, you can swap from that washing up liquid to that, and that's it. You've done it, and you just have to keep buying that one, and it's okay. And it's a small decision, but it makes a really, really big impact.
Do you find that stressful in any way, or do you find it liberating that, as you say, you can make these choices? Or, you know, does it take you longer to make a decision on who you support or whatever, because you have to maybe go through your filters of, you know, can I support this? Do I agree with this? Does it make the buying process harder, or does it make it more liberating for you?
I would say it's both. I would say that it's a bit of a headache, that, you know, I've got to find out if this is okay, and that's extra admin to do in my personal time when I'm not working, and so that the initial bits feels a little bit like, why isn't it not just easier? And yep, it will be so easy to just keep doing this thing, but this thing, it doesn't align with my morals anymore. And then you do the thing, and you try the product, or you sign up for the subscription or whatever, you know, like you know, I get small, and I'm not sponsored in any way, but I get small washing products, and they just come through the letterbox, and they probably, compared to the unethical alternative, they probably cost a little tiny bit more. But once I have done the switch and gone, do you know what, this is better on all levels, then I get the liberation and feeling great, and, like, you know, congratulating myself that, yeah, you pushed through that awkward bit where it was annoying and you had to set it up and that took time. But now it feels like every time that arrives, you've done a good thing, and it's automated now. You don't have to think about it anymore. And I think that in the past, when I was spending differently, when I was spending more like a normal person, choices like that felt a little bit out of reach, because maybe if they cost a little bit more and I did all of them, then that would end up costing a lot more. But actually, because I have ripped everything back, it's like, no, this is a value. I would prefer to do this because it doesn't support deforestation. It's a combination of discomfort and joy.
Sounds a bit like Quakerism.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk then. So we're kind of getting an idea of this. And how did the inspiration for the Frugal Quaker Instagram account, what was the inspiration behind that? What made you think this might be something that I wanna share with the online community?
So I had never really done social media before. I thought about, like, how I'd quite like to connect with other people, and I went through a series of shifts in terms of my frugal lifestyle. So I'd been following a lot of people on YouTube who were doing things like no spend years. So they weren't necessarily Quakers, but they were doing like no spend challenges. So I started following, back in like 2019, this fabulous YouTuber called Cynthia Dubois. And she's branched out into more academic things now. But I think all of her videos are still up there, and she was struggling with sort of part-time work and wanting to save up to do a PhD. That was her passion. And she figured out that she could do that if she did a no spend challenge. And I thought, that's really extreme, but I found the entire concept fascinating.
What is a no spend challenge? Is it as simple as it means, or
Yeah,
because I know you do quite a lot of that on your
I
account.
do.
So
I do. I
what
have
does it
been
mean?
inspired. So it means different things to different people. You make your own rules. So obviously you pay for your basic living costs and your rent or your mortgage or your bills. You don't write to all of your providers and say, I'm really sorry, I'm doing a no spend year. People have asked me, like, well, what do you do about food if you're having a no spend month? And it's like, obviously you buy food, you buy groceries, like you cater to your needs. You pay for anything that you need, like any kind of medical needs or anything like that. And it's different for different people. So from my perspective, I would say a no spend is where anything above and beyond the basics, unless it's, I have a contingency, like I budget above and beyond the no spend for charities per month, because I felt really uncomfortable cutting off charitable giving above and beyond what I do, like by direct debit, that's just factored into my budget. I felt really bad doing that. So I do have a charities budget. I haven't factored in things like gifts, because we're doing our first no spend this year, but we had been doing low spends from sort of 2020 onwards. We've been sort of dabbling with like a low spend month and seeing how that went, which was really, really eye-opening for what we were buying in terms of want/need. So this year what are we now? 5 months in. It's been imperfect, and there have been some months when I have literally spent, I think, nothing above the budget, and then there have been months where things have cropped up because it's life. But I feel like this is it's an opportunity. It's literally the first one that we've done. We have done many low spends. I feel like my whole life has been a low spend, basically since 2020. So 5 years. But it's making a conscious decision that anything that I spend is breaking the rules. So it needs to be important. And what we have found over the last 5 months is actually we really do consider what we buy. There haven't been many things that we've said, oh, I need that, and then we've realised that we just wanted it and we didn't get it. There have been some things, but it's kind of told us that actually the things that we buy, really considered, we don't impulse buy, and we sleep on it, we don't make rash decisions, and we're not buying anything that isn't actually necessary for life. So it's all really useful information, really, really useful information. But your question was, why did I start doing the Frugal Quaker? And yes. So I was about a year into the process at that point, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm doing all of this, as in I'm living my daily life. I'm living it in a faith-led way. I'm aligning myself with all of these personal ethics, and I'm trying to do good. And I'm not really able to share it with people because maybe the people in my life are not really aligned to that. So I guess I was kind of looking for community. I'd been doing a lot of it on my own, and it felt like I'm just going to take a chance, and I'd been thinking about it for probably a few months before I did it, and I kept going, oh no, no, I don't, nobody wants to see that, and that's not diminishing it. That was more of it's probably being done elsewhere, and it was incredibly touching, because the very first person who engaged with me was Esther Rutter, who is an esteemed Quaker author whose book I'd read, and it was just lovely, and it just felt absolutely wonderful that, there I was thinking, I'm literally putting this out into the universe. I doubt anything's going to come back. And I have had such a wonderful and welcoming experience in this little area of the internet, and it just feels like a really good place for me to share things. I get questions right now, currently as we speak. There are 2 people who are reading the Jeffrey Durham book on my recommendation, literally in different parts of the world. There are 2 people reading that book, and I think that's amazing. It's a way of me giving ministry and living the Quaker way and sharing the Quaker message.
That's kind of like how it was with me. You get like, well, who knows? Maybe no one will watch this, but I feel led to do it, and I want to share, and I want to create this community. I want to be with people who are thinking the similar sort of things with me, even when I'm not, like in meeting and stuff. And I think it can be really powerful, and it's nice to have that bubble around you, I suppose. So what do you post about? Obviously I know, but if you were to talk about your content and what messages you want to get out there, what can people find if people were to look you up?
Also, I post about lots of things from my daily life, so it's not sort of like, it's never one thing. It's a range of things. And I like to think that everything pretty much that I post about is somehow embedded with frugality or Quakerism or just my way of being. And somebody might look at my feed and go, well, those things don't say that to me. And that's fine, because we're all coming at this from different angles. But what would you find on my feed? So I post weekly about the food that we make at home. So we have proudly not had a takeaway, like a convenience takeaway meal, in over 6 years. And we're very, very proud of that fact, because my goodness, what a saving that has been. So we make pretty much all of our food fresh at home, like cooking from scratch. We have things like, we're both vegetarian. We have things like vegan proteins and things. Obviously, we don't make those. We buy those. We try and have a balance. So I tend to do a sort of a wrap up on Fridays of the frugal food that we've eaten this week, which ties in well on Fridays. So there will be one of those later today, because we're filming on a Friday. I like repairing things and doing crafts. So I do have multiple physical disabilities, and so I am a bit limited in how much sort of crafting I can do at any one time with my hands. But I don't do as much of that as I would like. I would love there to be more of that, but I've got some limitations. So I like repairing clothes. I like making things last longer. I like upcycling things that I already have. I make hair ties. I don't actually have any with me, but I used to have to go to a workplace, and I used to wear nylon tights to a workplace. I think that nylon tights are the most horrible, stifling, uncomfortable things in the world. And obviously nobody was forcing me to wear tights, but it was a kind of a cultural thing in the office. And what I've done is I've cut up all of my tights and I've made hair ties out of them, because I promised myself that I'm never going to wear tights again. Not those kind of unnatural, kind of nylon, horrible, sticky, nasty things. And I'm really lucky, I'm really, really privileged that I transitioned to working from home in early 2020. And I don't have to go into a workplace. So I can wear what I like on Zoom calls. So I find creative ways of, you can't donate old tights to a charity. So it's like, well, I don't want to put these in the bin. I never want to wear them again. What can I use? What can I do? And I saw that on Instagram, that somebody had recycled tights and made hair ties. So every time I do a batch of hair ties, I'll share things like that. So I share creative upcycling projects, crafty things. My biggest hobby is reading. And so it's not a Bookstagram account by any stretch. So that's maybe for some people that jars a little bit, but it's my favorite thing to do in my spare time. I try to always be reading in some capacity a faith-based book, because my Quaker journey, there was a lot of reading in my Quaker journey. And so I like to keep something like that going at the moment. I'm currently reading a book called A Simplified Life, which is about a nun who lives basically as a hermit on the coast of Wales, or she was living there, sort of like a memoir. So I'll post things like that. I post about my pets because they're fun. I love going out. I do. I post about my hamster on Mondays, and my dog gets a look in as well sometimes. My dog generally gets posted about when we go on walks, because that's a really wonderful frugal form of exercise. So I'm just sort of showing the changes that have been possible through me changing certain things about my life. So like the big context is that I've been working part-time for a long time because of my health issues and disabilities. So I've not been on a full-time salary in, oh my goodness, how long has it been? I think it was 2011 so we're talking nearly, what's that, 14 years? About 14 years since I've had a full-time salary. So that's been a process that I could have either said, this is terrible and awful, and I'm going to cry about the fact that my lifestyle has been impacted. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that, because actually I'm going to look at what I can gain from that. So by working less and looking after my health, and don't get me wrong, I know that I'm in a very privileged position to be able to work part-time and support my health. Like, not everybody is in that position at all, which is awful. But what I have been able to do is I've been able to be creative and not need the money that I was earning and flex my lifestyle and do things that are free or incredibly low cost. It helped me to see that what I was doing was I was increasing my pain, damaging my health, and I was doing that to be able to afford things that actually with creativity I could do for free. And so to me, that is absolutely no compromise whatsoever. My life is infinitely better than it was 15 years ago when I was working full time and basically debilitated by pain after most working days, so 5 days a week. And that's, to me, I'm winning.
And we all get to see it, especially on Margot Mondays, which I do appreciate. I do very much enjoy.
We do.
So I suppose a question I've had, because in Quaker parlance, a really common term is plain. And so you talk about plain Quakers in plain dress and plain speech. And that's a really common way of talking about Quakers, especially in terms of our heritage. You've gone with Frugal Quaker instead of plain Quaker. And I suppose, was that a conscious decision? And do you see a difference maybe between plainness and frugality? How does that work?
Personally, I see frugality as a modern day plainness because, we don't have to exist in greys and browns. If you look at historical planing and compare it to, say, modern day minimalism, it's quite similar. Obviously, the styles have changed, but it's quite similar. But we have to think as well that the consumerist culture has exploded. Early Quakers who were planing because they were encouraged to plane by their peers, they were encouraged to demonstrate to the world that they were living differently. They were living behind the Quaker hedge, which I think is a brilliant term. I love it. It's that separatism. They were demonstrating that with their clothing, with their language, with their choices. They were voting with who they supported financially, and those kinds of decisions were really explicit, and that made them look different to their peers in wider society. Whereas now it feels like, frugality isn't owned by Quakerism, but it's a beautiful way of demonstrating the testimony of simplicity, of living to the testimony of simplicity. And I know that I'm talking about simplicity in a really favourable way, and all of the testimonies are really, really important, and they all have great value. But I feel that the way that I live connects well with the testimony of simplicity. And I think that frugality is a term that people understand. And if I went around saying, well, I'm planing my life, they might need a bit more explanation about that. And that's fine. That would be absolutely fine. So I guess it's easier to relate to on a more global kind of language scale, because so many people are making frugal choices because of health, because of impact cost of living, because of the multitude of wars that we are currently experiencing. For so many reasons, there is a need for people who either have to or want to live a bit differently to try and create space. And not everybody can get that space. Not everybody can do that. But when you can, it is such a gift, because everybody needs to live. And I read a really interesting book called Your Money or Your Life a few years ago, and it really reframed how many hours do you spend working to do this thing, and how much of your life do you want to give up to do this thing, and what else could you do with your life? And so frugality has been just a conduit for me to live my life more authentically. Before I started making massive changes, I was attending meetings on Sundays, and I had been attending a midweek meeting as well with Woodbrook online. And so when I was sort of like working 4 days a week, it was quite intense, it was quite busy. I got to engage with Quakerism twice a week and the occasional nighttime talk. And now I engage with 4 to 5 meetings a week. And that is truly a gift.
Do you do that using the online Woodbrook meetings worship you're saying?
Completely, yeah.
How do you find those? I've done them a couple of times. Just as an aside, just doing it online instead of obviously being there physically. What does that mean for you? How do you experience it?
I have found it to be incredibly wonderful. I have found it to be so much easier for me physically to engage with, because if I'm in pain, I can open my laptop, whereas if I'm in pain, I can't drive to the meeting.
Sure.
Sitting in the meeting house was very, very challenging for me and would always cause me some element of pain. I know that a lot of people feel that it's not the same. I disagree. I feel that online meetings can be incredibly spiritually deep. And because I have been doing online meetings with Book for so many years now, I would say that the community of regulars is on a level with the community that I experienced previously when I did attend physical in-person meetings. And of course, it was a massive shift when we went into lockdown in the UK, and that simply wasn't an option for a while. But it demonstrated that you can show up in different ways. And for me personally, and for a lot of people that I know, that is in some ways easier and better for them. And it's been amazing. And I honestly don't know how my faith journey would have been impacted if I had not been able to engage with online meetings, if we hadn't had places like Woodbook to engage with.
I think it's true. I felt that at uni meeting as well. The fact that the care that the administration or the people running it took to make sure that people online felt as present and were as part of that. I think that's something that's really cool because we don't see meeting houses or that's particularly important. We don't have to be there sacramentally. I mean, it's being there physically for a meeting for worship does have a certain vibe, sure, and I'm not taking that away. But what I'm saying is that's not like the be all and end all. You don't have to be there to experience meeting. We believe, and Quakers have always believed that we can be anywhere at any time and we can experience that of God. And so I think that's a real strength of Quakerism, and I'm glad that has nourished you. I want to ask for some tips, Lindsay. I want to know, because I don't feel like I'm necessarily very good at being frugal, and I'm sure maybe someone listening might be like, I want to uphold the testimony of simplicity. I want to engage with that more, but I don't know how, and I don't know where to start. And yeah, I want to make sensible choices, but as you were saying, it's expensive, more expensive to do. Where can people start? What do you think is the most effective tips that you could give to potential frugal Quakers or non-Quakers?
Oh, definitely. And it's going to sound like it's so unrelated, but it's so related. I would say if you haven't already, the very, very best place to start thinking about being frugal is to sit down and draw up a budget. You can use an app, you can use a piece of paper and a pencil, you can use anything that you like. Go through your bank statements, figure out what you're spending your money on, figure out what your essential spends are, think about if you're on maybe the best deals for all of your essential spends. Some things like your housing might be completely immovable, and some things like your broadband provider might be negotiable. These things I would sit down and I would draw all of that out, because I have always had quite a good handle on like my money and my bills and things, but until I actually sat down and wrote a budget, it made me realize, well, where was the rest of it going? And, back in the day when I used to go for lunches or like for coffee shop, or, you'd go to charity shops and things like that. It's so easy to spend money. It's just so easy. And so actually getting a handle on, right, this is maybe how much I need to spend. This is maybe how much I earn, and this is what's left over. And then once you've got a handle of that, which can be incredibly eye-opening, like I say, even if you feel like you've got a really, really good handle on what your lifestyle is like, what your budget is like, there is always surprising room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Once I sort of had that information, I realized, okay, so now I have X amount of money and I can do something with it, and I can choose to do something with it. And I found that in doing that, it meant that I was donating more to charity, which felt really good because I was supporting things that I cared for, that I wanted to create positive change in the world. And then it made me start thinking, well, why am I buying that thing? Or do I need to buy that thing at that price? Or do I need to buy that thing new? Can I borrow it? So then we're sort of like digging down into questions that just mean taking a pause. And change is really challenging and it can be really slow. So don't expect to go from not having a handle on your finances to being 100% frugal in like 2 days, because life doesn't work like that. We have things that we would need to use up. we have been encouraged to walk lightly on the earth. Like, let's not bin off products that we don't think are ethical anymore. Let's use what we have. Let's create as little waste as possible. But it's small incremental change. I find that really knowing what I have in my home is very helpful, because I hate the idea of ever buying something that I already had. So yeah, definitely, like, just trying not to overspend, trying to know what you have, and doing little challenges. Like, can you go a day without making any purchases that aren't necessary? Can you go a week? Can you try a month? What about beyond a month? And it's amazing the things that you learn, that I have learned when I've challenged myself to just take a pause, just stop doing that. Don't do what is maybe expected. Don't do what you maybe expect of yourself. Don't buy that thing and see how it feels. And the lessons have been just amazing. And in one way, I would say, I'm so disappointed, Ollie, that I didn't figure all of this out sooner. But I can say I'm really glad that I figured it out when I did. And when we know what we have in our homes, we can figure out how much of this stuff do we actually need. Because, my history is that I was actually raised by my great-grandparents, and they had their formative years growing up in the Second World War. So they'd experienced rationing and lots of things. And so they had quite a frugal, make, do and mend, try not to overspend. They had a really good attitude, and that was embedded in me as a child. And what do we do when we get our own money when we're earning? So like my mid to late teens and into my 20s, I was earning my own money. And I was sort of rebelling against all of that. And I was creating my own, like, I was building my home. I was obviously, like, I was living independently, and I was buying the things that I would like. And so I had a period that didn't last too long, but a period in my life of kind of gathering goods. And then I realized, what does all of this serve? So I was like, building a home with my partner, and we got married, and, we did all those things. And then it really started to kind of sit uncomfortably with me. Why do we need all of this stuff? And I'm not talking a ridiculous amount. We're just a normal couple with a normal home. And I started reading things about people who are like challenging themselves to do decluttering, and I really got interested in that. And so for years and years, because we were two households that came together as one household that was really concentrated. And so we have let go of a lot of things. You don't need two toasters. You don't need duplicates of things. And it's been a long process, because all of those things had a purpose. They had a life. They had a reason. But I have.
And you get attached to things as well.
You get attached. You do things of sentimental value, but all the rest of the stuff that maybe isn't useful, important, beautiful, necessary, sentimental, all of that we've been just trying to pass along to the next person. So we've massive donations to charities around the area that we live. And then since I became really unwell 4 years ago with chronic illness, on top of the disabilities that I mentioned, like the physical disabilities, doing things like getting things to the charity shops just became impossible for me, just absolutely impossible. I was kind of restricted to, when people put things through the left box, like clothing bags and things that you can then leave out for charities to collect. Really kind of restricted to that. But not everything that I had to donate was clothes. Sorry, it would be like bric-a-brac and things like that. So last year, I again just thought, it's been something that I've had on my mind. I'm going to give it a try. Literally, just put things into a box, put free on the box, and put it on the edge of my property, just outside. I live like in a residential area, but it's close to a main road. Lots of people cut through my road, and the amount of things since I think I started doing this like late last summer, so maybe September time, August, September, late last year, the amount of boxes that have been completely filled, emptied, people in the local area just taking things that they need. And it feels really, really good. We've had lovely conversations with the local community, people saying, oh my goodness, I got something from your box, it was brilliant, thank you so much. And it started, I'm not saying we started this, but it's really started a bit of a culture that people are doing it in the area, and it's lovely to see. It's like neighbours helping neighbours. It's my way of still donating and helping and sharing resources, even if I'm quite limited physically with what I can do.
I think what I like, and what I like on your account as well, is that the is the idea of fun as well. That, as you say, is making it into like a challenge, and then like you have this really nice infographic of how much you've saved and where and what you've spent on and how you're doing with your goals and stuff. I think that is because it can, obviously, talking about money and talking about things can be really stressful, can be really there's lots of difficult decisions and things that need to be made into that. So if any way where you can make it fun and where you celebrate your successes, where you have done, I think is absolutely the right thing to
Oh,
do.
definitely. I really love it. It gives me tons of dopamine. I love decluttering. I love seeing people happily take things away. I love supporting people. We've even been doing some fundraisers this year where we've been selling items that then all of the money goes to charity, and that's been really lovely. And it's like, how do I keep expanding this? So yeah, if you can find something that like sparks joy, not to sound too cliched about it, like Marie Kondo and her sparking joy mentality of decluttering. If you can find that thing that sparks joy in it, then it's a pleasure to do. Living in the UK where we live, where the quality of life is the standard of life is quite high, the standard of living is quite high. I know how privileged it is to be in a position where you can give away your belongings and give away some of your income. I just want to acknowledge that this, it's not going to be accessible for everybody, and everybody has their own gifts, their own spiritual gifts, their own gifts in community. But that I think that what we've learned over the last half decade now is that there are different ways of showing up for each other and for ourselves. And I can imagine that if I was in a relationship with somebody who was like really spendy or who wanted loads of things, then this would be a lot more challenging than it is. And it kind of links to what I was saying earlier about how, I came to Quakerism and then I kind of realized that some people were maybe dismissing some of the things that I was trying to do with my life, and living a bit more simply, needing less, therefore using less resources for myself, therefore resources being available for others. They could not really relate to that. And I think that, I'm really incredibly blessed that my partner is 100% on board with this. I'm not married to a Quaker, but she's really Quaker adjacent. And so I would say, it just makes it so much easier, because if I was in my home and fighting against somebody who didn't like this, then that would be really, really difficult. Like, it's really hard to live a frugal, simple, kind of faith-inspired life if you've got chaos. And I call it chaos, like chaos of spending and wanting and consuming and needing. And, we're really lucky. We live quietly and we don't have those kinds of challenges. And our, immediate family members, they don't really understand what this is all about. And, it's always like, oh, well, do you want to be taken out for food or something? It's like, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
We don't want to be taken out for food because that's a waste of money.
It's not about saving the money, it's about using the money sensibly. And obviously, if then someone else spends it for you, it kind of takes away from what you're trying to do by not doing that. Yeah, I get it.
It's so easy to kind of look in and say, oh, that's deprivation. And it's like, this is liberation. It's not deprivation. I don't miss any of those things that you might be citing, like coffees out or meals or, whatever. I don't miss those things. They were great and I've experienced lots of them. I don't miss them. I love the way that I live now, and it feels so much truer. I would just say to people not to be put off. Don't try and start big. Just start small. Just little ways of living a little bit counterculturally and see what that means. We're fed as a society that you need all these things. You have to keep getting a bigger house. You have to keep getting more things. You need this, you need this, you need this. And my question is always, really? Why? Why do we need that? I don't resonate with that message at all. And actually, if you go smaller, as in a smaller home, like I said, I live in a 1-bedroom property. I live and I work in a 1-bedroom property. And that's challenging. It really, really is challenging. And it has been challenging. But my goodness, I'm not heating more rooms than I need. And I'm not spending on more space. I mean, yes, a workspace at home would be amazing, but we make it work the way that it is. It's not just physical stuff, but sometimes we get so caught up with physical stuff that we lose sight of how much energy and time am I investing in that one item, and actually if it goes away, how much better could that be? And it's just a different way of looking at things.
I think it's good because I think you've given us, I think the tips that you've given us have been incremental. So, you start off with this, then maybe try this, then maybe start this. I love that you're coming out with this sort of flipping on its head. I asked you at the beginning, do you not find this way of living stressful? And just there you were like, well, actually, I think the opposite way of living is quite stressful. And so just really showing that actually this is a really positive thing. This is something that, you can do at your own speed, at your own time, in your own way. You can have your own take on it, but ultimately you're doing more and more good as you go.
And don't do it on your own. There is so much out there. There are books, there are podcasts, there are blogs, there are YouTube videos, there are Instagram accounts. I'm sure there are things on Facebook even. Find your community.
I'm resonating with a lot of these messages, and it's definitely made me think, I need to just have a good sit down and just make sure I know where all my money's at. Lindsay, thank you very much for your time. It's been really helpful. It's been really cool. It's been a really different kind of conversation. I haven't really had anything like this before. I would say if you haven't, and then please do go and check Frugal Quaker out on Instagram and give her a follow if that's something that you do. And everyone, thank you very much for watching as well, and we will see you in the next video.
Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.